Out of all of the Nickelodeon shows there are, I always thought Jimmy Neutron was the one that had the most potential for a really cool video game. You got your gadgets, you're making all these inventions, and you've got this already 3D world that would translate really easily into a 3D game, unlike a lot of other Nickelodeon shows which often needed some creative liberties to go from 2D to 3D. We got to see bits and pieces of that potential as the years went by, but while some of these games are charming in their own right, none of them really felt like they were truly making the most out of the concept. Jet Fusion was kind of a step in the right direction. You got to make all sorts of weird inventions and use them to progress in a lot of unique ways, but it is riddled with problems, and it didn't even really get the feel of the show either. It's really not hard to tell that they contracted it out to a studio that wasn't terribly familiar with the show, and that led to a lot of weird decisions.
This boss got your name on it, Neutron.
It really ended up feeling like just another Rush license game, but I guess with another TV special hitting networks came one more opportunity for the wicked Jimmy Neutron game we all wanted to finally get made. Neutron kicked off his third season with Attack of the Twonkies, a 44-minute two-parter that feels a little bit closer to Jimmy's origins than Jet Fusion, leaving behind the spy career to once again go head-to-head with some good old alien invaders. The special follows Jimmy to Twonkies 3, a comet he goes to mine some minerals on, and as he comes back home, he realizes that he's accidentally brought a funny little alien guy back from the comet.
No one can have him! Keeping a space creature as a pet is a violation of scientific protocol.
Of course, despite the warnings, Carl decides to keep the appropriately named Twonkie, as he's been looking for a pet, and the Twonkie's the first thing he's found that doesn't set off his allergies. The Twonkie then begins to inexplicably multiply, with everybody in Retroville going gaga over the cute little dudes, taking them all home as pets as Jimmy yanks his hair out, watching all these idiots take home alien creatures we don't know anything about!
Listen to me! I saw an 8-foot-tall monster that came from the same comet!
So, of course, not even an hour later, they find out that when they're exposed to music, the Twonkies evolve into violent creatures that destroy everything and bring terror to Retroville. From here on out, it more or less becomes a parody of Gremlins too. You know, like the whole pets turning into monsters thing, you know, a lot of chaos, a lot of goofs. They even have a scene where the previous movie's playing in the theater. You don't get any more on the nose than that. So with music being the thing that mutates them, it's up to Jimmy to figure out whatever the hell the opposite of that would be so he can stop them.
You actually sing so badly, the Twonkie perceives it as anti-music. Instead of enraging him, it lulls him to sleep.
Well, I like to bribe. Hey!
I thought that was a pretty funny reason. It also does a really good job of tying Sheen's subplot of being rejected from the school chorus back into the main plot. Overall, I think it holds up alright. There's a bunch of moments that really made me laugh, but I don't know, Hugh's subplot felt really disconnected and pointless, and I felt the character-driven humor was a lot better in Jet Fusion. This special was also later on into the series, and that's when they started to lean a lot harder into the comic relief, before spinning off entirely into Planet Sheen, because like, I swear to God, it really feels like there was a producer leaning over the animator's shoulders in this season being like, please, cut to the funny more often, please. Cut to the funny again, because like Carl and Sheen get way too much screen time and they're not really bouncing off of Jimmy as much. It's alright, like again, it has moments, but I think I like the Jet Fusion special better for sure. Now as for the game, well, I don't expect to be saying the same thing. This is the one everybody's been asking me about. Jimmy Neutron Attack of the Twonkies for PS2 and GameCube. THQ Australia, I guess instead of outsourcing it like they did with Jet Fusion, this one was handled by one of THQ's internal teams. Still based in Australia though, interestingly enough. This studio mostly just made Nickelodeon games, mostly Avatar games, but they also made a Megamind game, and then they got closed down in 2011, which wasn't that long before THQ as a whole went bankrupt. Always really weird remembering that the THQ today is not the same company as back then. Just people that bought the name and all the properties and just continued doing business under it. Did a lot of HD remasters. Really appreciated them doing a good port of Sphinx for the Switch. This was the other Jimmy Neutron game I grew up playing. I remember getting it for Christmas the year it came out. I think I was in 4th grade, and when I opened the present, it looked like an extra thick GameCube game case because my mom actually bundled it with a DVD copy of the movie, which I didn't have yet, and that was really cool. But I think I popped it into the GameCube like 4 or 5 days later, and I was just thinking like, why did I sleep on this? This is awesome. I love the crap out of this thing. Like, I just thought it nailed the feeling of the show. These were areas that I've been seeing on TV again and again and again, and suddenly I had this way of like walking around and looking around at myself, and that was just amazing. And it's really interesting having such fond memories of this thing because like I read a lot of YouTube comments, and that 100% seems to be the general consensus. People really seem to like this game. I mean, this was the one that made me want to do this review series to begin with, so I'm really excited that we're finally here, and I'm gonna see how this thing holds up. Okay, best title screen yet, easy. Oh, I love that aerial shot of Retroville. If you stare at it long enough, you'll get to see a lot of the characters and locations from the show, and oh, Goddard projecting over that backdrop is just genius. And the static for the transitions, oh my god. And oh, that theme song, that is a sick-ass cover of the theme. It's a totally new rendition of it just for this game, and I think they did a really good job with it. Alright, let's do a new game.
I give you the remote-powered mini-comet!
This game opens up exactly the same as a TV special. Jimmy showing off a remote-controlled version of the comet that he plans to explore later.
Ah! Get it off me! Whose comet is this?
And that concludes my presentation, thank you.
A lot of the lines are re-recorded versions of lines from the episode itself, with a lot of shots more or less being recreated one-to-one.
You're slipping, Neutron. Real comets have long, pretty tails, not little stumpy ones.
Wait, Cindy's hair? Again? Why is this a constant thing with Jimmy Neutron games? This is the 4th one I've seen use their old movie design. And even weirder, the game actually does follow the plot of the episode, unlike the Jet Fusion game, which I don't even know where any of that came from. It's gotta be some weird production reason, like maybe the accuracy of these scenes is more of a result of better design documents given to the devs. These might be models they made during pre-production, using the film for reference before they were given the actual material to go off of, and then they might have been given storyboards and scripts that were a lot more accurate to the actual special than whatever the hell they gave Chrome for Jet Fusion. Libby's model's up to date though, which is really strange considering, but I guess being a more minor character, they might have made her model later on into production, and by then they may have had more information about the series. Obviously, I don't know any of this for sure, but if I had to make an educated guess based on my understanding of the game industry, probably something like that. So anyway, while the intro is mostly the same, we are turning a 44-minute episode into a whole-ass video game, so there is a lot of rearranging and filling in spaces. For example, in the show, there's a subplot revolving around Libby trying to get a punk band called Greystar to play for the school, but in the game, Principal Willoughby just comes in and establishes that during the cutscene.
Greystar will be playing as well.
Greystar!
That animation is really solid. I'm actually really impressed by it, like especially after how bad it was in the Jet Fusion game. This really does feel like the show, and not just the shots from the show either. I mean, obviously the models won't be as smooth, it's GameCube and PS2, this isn't pre-rendered CG like the show is, but no, like the animation and the voice talent too, they sell it so well that you really kind of feel like you're actually watching an episode of the show.
You know the comet that I have just been describing to the class?
Jimmy then heads to his lab to prepare for the trip to Twonkies 3, and oh my god, dude! Wow, they nailed it! Look at all this. This is the lab, man. Everything's here. The attention to detail here, oh my god, it is far beyond what any of the Neutron games have done before. Look at all these inventions.
Now all I need to do is deliver it to Vortex's house.
Oh yeah, they got that detail right this time. Yeah, learn a tour thing from that one, Jimmy Potato. Unfortunately, my excitement for the game quickly became draining impatience as they hit me with one of these.
Okay, Jimmy, you can control the camera with the C stick.
Can I skip? No.
On the controller. Push the
C
stick.
I push the buttons on the controller. Got it. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought to do that myself. It's like, oh yeah, this is a licensed game, which means they have to teach you how to play the game by, you know, teaching you how to play the game, which is not how you teach somebody to play the game. Like, come on, there's not that many actions. Y interacts with stuff, okay. There's 2 menus you need to make and use inventions, okay. And there's a double jump. Just, okay, that's it. Just put me in a room with 3 pieces of junk and some boxes. I'm gonna figure out how to be double jumping and brain blasting all my own, thank you very much. You didn't need to sit me down and carefully explain it to me like I'm some sort of dump ass.
Press up or down on the control pad
Okay,
to
shut up,
change.
I'll just explain it. As you explore each level, you'll be collecting all sorts of objects you can make inventions out of. Just open up the menu, scroll through your options, combine some junk, and see what happens.
Think! Brain blast!
Oh, so nice to see a Brain Blast animation looking actually good for once. Got really tired of staring at Jimmy's purple poo brain last time. You were able to make 3 different types of gadgets. There's Inventions, Super Inventions, and Gizmos. Each one requires a different amount of pieces to make. So the Inventions are more or less what you'd expect. It's just any device that Jimmy puts together and uses to progress in some shape or form. We're talking the essentials, your shrink ray, your jetpack, and anything you'll be using frequently. Super Inventions are just the invention you need to beat the boss with. You'll have to find everything to make it before you can take them on and finish the level. Now the Gizmos are an interesting little thing. These are non-essential, usually optional inventions. There are 1 or 2 that you do need to progress, like the gravity shoes, but 90% of the time they're more like a knick-knack collectible you view once just to see it. There's a couple of them that are actually really helpful, like the Super Health Recharge.
Super Health Recharge!
And the Speed Sneakers are also really great for just generally getting around faster, but most of these don't really do anything outside of playing an animation. Like popcorn that makes you dance, or a hair slicker that gives you a cartoonishly large pompadour. Okay, this is starting to come back to me. I remember finding this real weird as a kid, including so many items that, like, don't do anything, right? But playing this again now as an adult, I think I kinda get it. Like, I think it works. And I say that because, you know, I think back to every other Jimmy Neutron game I've played, and the thing I always want to be doing is creating and using inventions. I don't care if they're helpful, I don't care if they let me progress or not, I just want to be, like, using my brain to make and use things that are fun, and I feel like that first PC game was really the only one to kind of get that. Jet Fusion had us making and using inventions, but since you only need so many items before the end of the game, you only get that feeling of putting some parts together and having a new toy to play with just a handful of times. And I realized when I was writing this video it would have been the same case here if you only made those important ones you actually need, but that is not the case. You get to make inventions all the time. It's just like the show. You see Jimmy taking random household objects, you're turning them into something weird, and you see it not even work half the time. And the fact that only some of them are helpful makes it exciting to see if this time you're gonna get something handy, or, you know, just another one of Jimmy's flops. I mean, that happened in the show plenty of times. Like, sure, as a gameplay thing, it is kind of dumb, but it's not created to serve the gameplay. It's created to give me something to do that feels in tune with the show it's based on, and because of that, despite how useless these things were, I still had a really fun time making them and trying them all out because of that. And yeah, I'm not gonna pretend that it wouldn't have been really cool if these actually all did have a greater purpose and you got to use them for puzzles and stuff like that, but it's a licensed game made on a budget and a deadline, dude. That's not gonna happen. So the fact that they did still try to give you that feeling of slapping stuff together to see what you get, in spite of the lack of utility, it's still really amazing. They didn't have to, but just to fill the collectathon quota with something interesting, they created all of these little side things for you to make and whip out for 2 seconds and go, I can write the word ass. And I think that is really special. So once again, just like the Jet Fusion game, we've got a battery meter that we can use to power some items. However, instead of only the more powerful items using up energy, this time every item in the game will use it. And while that does sound more demanding at first, the battery pickups have luckily been reworked. They're a lot more plentiful and they'll actually respawn in this time, so instead of being something that just forces you to ration your better moves, now it's something that keeps you on your toes without being annoying about it. On top of your 3 types of inventions, we also got an array of commands for Goddard we can access from the equipment menu. Sit and stay for pushing down buttons, locate mode for sniffing out items, and excavation mode, and of course the classic playing dead. You can't use it whenever you want though, like in Jet Fusion. You can only use these commands if you're standing beside something that requires it, so don't expect to watch Goddard explode too much in this one. Oh, actually, come to think of it, no, that's the only time you get to watch him explode. You need the move 1 time in the entire game. They barely get any use out of Goddard in this game at all. You'll hold down a switch in the lab, excavate some minerals on Twonkies 3, sniff out a couple of items in the school lockers, and blow up once. That's it. And not even halfway through the game, it's like they forget you even have them. Oh yeah, this is the dumbest one, the bone you throw for him. Goddard runs to get it and smashes through everything in his path, but it's like, A, why wouldn't you just use play dead, and B, they thought of this idea, they animated this idea, they programmed this idea into the game, and made you use it once. Really big bummer too, because I feel like we finally wrapped everything Goddard can do into a nice, neat little package here, and they barely get any use out of it at all. The same can unfortunately also be said about most of the main inventions too. Pretty much every time you need a major invention, like the shrink ray or something, you only get to use it the 1 time. It was really cool having to figure it out, like, oh, I don't have to shrink the Twonkies, I gotta use that mirror and shrink myself and get through. Really cool puzzle, legitimately made me feel like like Batman. And then you never get to do anything like that ever again. Jetpacking up this alley was really fun, but after this sequence, the jetpack is useless for the rest of the game. Okay, this spot here, this is what I'm talking about. You gotta use the refracto ray to break the glass. Last time I needed this thing was on Twonkies 3, so here I was with an item I needed to use that I hadn't thought about in a while, and I had to think to myself, oh, what do I have that breaks glass? Oh, this thing! But unfortunately, while that moment is really cool, it doesn't happen very often at all. And that's so disappointing. In a game about creating all of these inventions, you'd think they'd try to think of a lot of fun scenarios where you get to use them, but many of the times the game does things like that, it sometimes doesn't even end up relying on an invention at all. Why not make me invent something to hurt these llamas? Or right here, you gotta get Carl's glasses back from a funny little monkey, but instead of using any of our wacky inventions to get it down in a fun or interesting or exciting way, you just hit the switch and turn on the ceiling fan, and well, that's that. I do love this one part where you gotta hammer away at this drum kit until you piss off the Twonkie enough to make him calm down. Like, these moments are in here, but I think they would have been a lot better if they more frequently involved using the inventions. And again, like I said, I am okay with the idea of many of these just being a dumb, unhelpful little thing. I'm okay with the Gizmos, a full section of these that are like this. I just wish the main inventions got a lot more use. Instead, you'll mostly just be relying on the same two for most of the game, which are obviously what you'll be using to take down all these Twonkies. You got the Twonkie vacuum for sucking up the little guys, and the Shinograph for shrinking down the big ones. So while in the show Jimmy uses a large vacuum to suck up the big Twonkies, here Jimmy creates a smaller scale backpack model to scoop up the small ones. And instead of strapping Sheen to the front of the hovercraft to put on a live performance, this time we use a recording of Sheen's voice.
Downstairs in the study, you'll find a CD of my greatest hits that I'm about to send off to all the record companies.
By projecting the sound of Sheen's hideous voice through a beam, Jimmy can shrink down any larger Twonkies back to size, and from there it's time to suck them up Luigi's Mansion style. The opposite can happen too, just like the show. If you let a Twonkie near some music for too long, they're gonna grow into a bigger form, so it's best to shut off all the radios you see before that can happen. Capturing these guys is what the gameplay will primarily revolve around. You may have a double jump, but there's barely any platforming in this game at all. It's more of a round 'em up kind of game than a platformer, kind of like Ape Escape or something. There's also a spin jump, which you also don't need ever. I have no idea why they put this in. Executing it is like the strangest thing too. At first it would only ever happen by accident. I'm like, what is this jump that keeps happening? I can't make it happen, so I check the manual and it just says to rotate the stick and jump. Alright, like Mario Sunshine, I guess, easy peasy. So I, why don't this work? Turns out it's less about the stick rotating and more about Jimmy rotating. Yeah, there it is. Weird thing to have in this game. Like, it doesn't help anybody at all. I'm trying to grab the ghoulies. Why do you want to launch me up there? Sometimes you'll have to deal with these real big guys who will throw stuff at you, and fun fact, they were actually not in the show. They made these guys up just to have a third enemy for the game, which is kind of cool actually, having a whole new form you get to see. They can be a bit of a pain in the ass, especially since there's no way to lock on or dodge or anything in this game. It's that old school kind of clunk where you gotta fight with the camera a little bit. You'll bounce back and forth between blasting and vacuuming as you go through each level, and it's a satisfying enough gameplay loop. The vacuum doesn't really have much input involved to help keep you engaged though. You just kind of hold the stick back and get it every time. The actions are pretty basic, and while they are fun, it does get a little bit repetitive. Yet I hardly had a problem with that, because finding and collecting Twonkies, well, that puts emphasis on the exploration, and isn't that kind of what you want from a game that's recreating environments you want to be in? You want the game to give you a reason to head out and look around. The lab was just the tip of the iceberg. Every level recreates a familiar Jimmy Neutron location. They've got the neighborhood recreated. You can even go inside Jimmy's house and explore the whole thing, and even Sheen's house and Cindy's house too. Not entirely sure why we can go in Cindy's house. She definitely didn't invite us in, but it's cool to see it all recreated nonetheless. Now, this isn't the first time a Jimmy Neutron game has done this, but it is the first, and I guess only time, it's been done with this level of detail. If you want the experience of being in the show, Attack of the Twonkies is the game that does it the best. I tell ya, I was walking through some of these areas and I was grinning ear to ear. I was like a kid in the candy bar. Oh, yo, we got Retroland too? Oh, there's the Bat Outta Heck ride and the Eyeball ride too. I remember seeing that one a lot in the show. Oh, there's the ride that Carl makes his ship out of in the movie. The Octopus too, that's a classic. Oh, wow, you can even ride some of these. That's cool as hell. Doesn't quite have the level of interactivity that the Retroland in the PC game had, but it's still really cool how much of this you can actually go up to and do something with. In the arcade, you can make Jimmy play DDR. There's also a bunch of arcade games you gotta play in here. You'll have to beat Nick's high score on all 5 to finish this level. Luckily though, none of them are all that high, so it doesn't take all that long to do, so it comes off more as like a fun little diversion than a series of obnoxious minigames like Jet Fusion had. Thank God, I was worried it was gonna be that one thing. You know what I mean, that one thing the game's like, hey, do this. But nah, I just do well enough at it for like, I don't know, 3 minutes tops each, and you're good. None of them are all that complicated either, just simple clones of Asteroids, Block Breaker, Berserk. This one's kind of an in-between Space Invaders and Galaga. Decimated a frickin' Frogger cabinet, at least I got something out of beating all those Frogger games last year. Definitely a much more appropriate place for this kind of gameplay. In the original Jimmy Neutron PS2 game, there were these disjointed arcade shoot-'em-up levels that you could access just like whenever your ship was laying around, but you didn't have to do them, you got nothing for doing them, and it made no sense they were even there to begin with. Spaceship minigame actually makes sense in this one. It just occurs on the way to Twonkies 3, and yeah, once again they managed to make this come off as a quick, fun little change of pace instead of something annoying like Jet Fusion always did. Annoying minigames were such a common thing in these licensed games, so it's pretty nice to see ones that are really unintrusive for once. That's really cool how you can see Jimmy's reflection in the glass there. Again, like the attention to detail in this game is out freaking standing. I also like how they announce every level name like it's an episode of the show.
Jimmy Neutron in Main Street Mayhem.
Though I guess in the actual show they don't really announce the titles like that, but I don't know, it's still kinda cool. The music is easily one of the most accurate details here too. The soundtrack for Attack of the Twonkies, it lands so hard. A lot of the tracks rearrange those familiar bass lines and melody from the intro into these awesome new tracks that feel straight out of the show. Once you've captured all the Twonkies in a level, and you've finished creating that level super invention, it's now time to take on the boss. They're all different versions of that giant Twonkie from the TV special. Oh man, I thought it was cool enough that they made up that third larger guy just for this game, but no, here they are making up entirely new boss designs too, each one with a totally unique element. The electric guy had you placing down these devices that draw and absorb its lightning strikes as you're dodging bolts of electricity that dance through the metal playground. The ice Twonkies got you launching hockey pucks off of these ramps. The shadow Twonkie, oh my god, this guy's got you breaking holes in the ceiling to cast down these beams of light on him. I figured out how to charge it up really fast pretty quickly, so like I was dropping these like mad. The guy couldn't even move an inch without being lasered by the sun. These are not half bad. They're easily better than Jet Fusion's boss fights, which were okay at best and frustrating at worst. They can be a little irritating sometimes, like how the tornadoes launch you so far away from what you're trying to do, or you know, slipping everywhere on the ice. But sometimes you can't avoid these things. Like if you've collected the right Gizmo pieces, you can invent these sticky shoes that prevent you from slipping. I kind of wish there was more moments like this where the Gizmos really got the shine, but oh well. The final level takes us to a radio station, and wow, this game may have started pretty close to the episode, you know, sticking some stuff in here and there, but no, after downtown, the game really goes off the rails. I mean, they never even go to Retroland in the episode. Everything wraps up on the street. But now here we are blasting Twonkies off the rides at Retroland. It's sick. And then Jimmy's like, hey Carl, I don't know where the plot's going. Can you check the radio for what to do next?
Coming up next is Help! Oh, the humanity! Ah!
I don't think I've heard that song before.
No, Sheena, I think they're in trouble.
Yeah, they literally just make up a reason, and then here we are at a radio station for the final level. Kind of a weird pick, like you'd think they'd pick something really iconic from the Jimmy Neutron show, but here's this original radio station, but I don't know, I guess it does make sense since the Twonkies do really hate music. And you also get to look at something a little bit different and interesting for the final stretch of the game. The visual design here is like really colorful and cool looking. Alright, so after we round up the last of them, we then get pretty much the same scene from the show where Jimmy and the gang are celebrating by listening to Greystar, and then the Twonkies bust out of captivity behind them in a new super form. Except, you know, as you can see, they kind of changed the location of the scene because, well, we had to add some video game levels, and, well, I guess we're at a hockey rink now, so we'll just make it work here, I guess. The final boss is really just a combination of the previous three bosses. It literally just switches between the three every now and then, having you recycle the exact same strategies from before. It's an okay final boss, I guess, but something more original would have been way better, but, you know, I guess there is a budget and a deadline. It is a licensed game after all. We're already looking at something much better than what you'd usually get, so I guess it is kind of hard to complain, really. Once you bonk the final twonk, Jimmy and his friends celebrate before he mentions that he feels like they forgot something. Yeah, they just do the exact same cliffhanger the show did, except they don't set it up. They do not set up this cliffhanger and they still show it. This really confused me as a kid. I was like, why was he in there? I don't remember that. Back then, I actually saw the special after beating the game, so like when I first saw this cliffhanger, it made no sense to me. And then I saw the special and I was like, oh, it was Sheen's Twonkie that they left in his backpack, you know, that's a thing in the show. but not at all in the game, yet they still drop the same cliffhanger like they expect it to mean something to you. I don't know. It's just one of those weird differences between the game and the movie. Special, episode, I don't know. But either way, it's really interesting noticing how they like rearranged a lot of the plot elements to work as a game. As far as covering the source material goes, they do a really solid job. We may end up all over Retroville thanks to needing more video game levels, but all of the major plot points still get hit. Carl and Sheen's subplots are still set up, and Sheen's even pays off early when it makes more sense to use it to instead introduce a game mechanic. A lot of decisions, you can tell, were made pretty carefully. And unlike the Jet Fusion game, the characters actually feel quite understood here. Despite dropping her subplot, Libby still shows interest in Greystar and music in general. Butch actually sounds and acts like Butch this time. Carl and Sheen are written pretty accurately. The gags feel like they hit the same sense of humor you'd expect from the show, and all the minor characters make up for the game. They always feel right at home.
Thank you very much for that.
You could also expect to hear a decent amount of Rob Paulsen in this one. Many of his characters are finally getting in some good screen time here. Almost feels like they're making up for not having the guy in most of these games. Carl wasn't even in the Jet Fusion game, and they got somebody else to voice him in the first one. And it really does make a huge difference. Things like getting the proper cast back to voice the entire game are integral to nailing down the soul of the show. And Attack of the Twonkies is the one Jimmy Neutron game that feels like it's actively trying to do that. Like, on the surface, Attack of the Twonkies is just like an okay action game, but deeper than that, it is also a love letter to the Jimmy Neutron series, filled to the brim with references and details that any Neutron fan could easily pick out. And while it doesn't really make the absolute most out of his creature collecting and gadget inventing concept, I still think they chose a style of gameplay that was best fit for getting you to really explore these environments. And even if most of the inventions aren't useful at all, they still gave me an experience that was closer to watching the show than any previous game had done with the inventions yet. If I had to recommend just one Jimmy Neutron game, it's without a doubt gotta be this one. Like, the gameplay is a little bit repetitive and uninventive, but no pun intended, but it's just so good at nailing the feeling of the show that it's pretty tough to care, and it does a really good job of accurately covering the source material while adding enough on top to have enough levels to fill a game with. And every time they do deviate from the source material, they always manage to make it feel true to the show. It is a bit disappointing how little they get out of some of these items, Goddard especially, but while the gameplay itself does leave a bit to be desired, it is all of those details that it gets so right, from the environments to the music to the writing, everything you want from a Jimmy Neutron game. This is, without a doubt, the one that puts it all into the best package. I mean, that said, if you're not a Jimmy Neutron fan, it's probably not going to read much more than just a simple Ape Escape clone, so if you just want this sort of game with this sort of gameplay, Ape Escape is what you want to play. The second one's on PSN for just $10, and it does a much better job of fleshing out this gameplay concept, with tons more gadgets and gizmos for tracking down and grabbing those monkeys. But as something that simply uses that concept to explore Retroville and have you take it all in and do what you love Jimmy Neutron for doing, Attack of the Twonkies does a pretty damn good job of that. I loved the game growing up, and I am very happy to say, yeah, it still does for me now what it did for me back then. So if you are a big fan of Jimmy Neutron, I would actually really recommend playing this thing. As of this video, I've been seeing it at pawn shops for like $20 Canadian maximum, also not bad on eBay either, so for the foreseeable future, not that hard a game to get your hands on. The PS2 version is cheaper and easier to find, obviously, but it won't look quite as nice as the GameCube version. The colors are a little bit more washed out, as they usually are on PS2 ports, but it's really not enough to make you dodge it if that is the version that's most convenient for you. Or if you really want to spend nothing, you could get the Game Boy Advance for it. It's more or less the same concept except the side-scroller. You're still blasting and grabbing those Twonkies, but there's a lot more actual platforming involved this time. But we'll take a closer look at it, and all of the others another time, when we tackle all of Jimmy Neutron's Game Boy Advance games. Hope you guys will join me for one last brain blast as we jump through all of Neutron's 32-bit bite-sized adventures. But until then, keep on brain blasting, keep on smarting, and keep your gunk out of your noggin. Hey, welcome to the end of this thing. Hope you liked it. Hope you learned something. If you want to support the show and help me keep doing what I'm doing, I've got a $1 podcast over on my Patreon where we talk about videos and games and take questions from the patrons. Or if you're new here and you just like the Jimmy Neutron, I talk about a lot of platformers on this channel, so I don't know. Subscribe if you like that, I guess.